charges against them which are going to have to be set aside if we're going to bring the conflict to an end. And that has to be a proper process, but it has to be an Afghan-led process.
Mike Emanuel, Fox. General, wondering, is the IED threat in Marja still significant? Are new IEDs being placed each day and your forces encountering them? And I'm wondering if both of you have had a chance to go over perhaps lessons learned, if not lessons learned, and any surprises from the Marja offensive from your perspective?
From a military standpoint, there were hundreds of IEDs placed in Marja like minefields, and many of them were covered by direct fire so that they were put in places where they thought coalition forces would have to go, and then they covered them with direct fire. That's not a new tactic. We've seen it before, but we saw hundreds, and there are still some to be removed, a significant number. There's been a little bit of reseeding, we think, by some of the Taliban that are still there, and I expect more of that, but not in huge numbers. So I think it's a tactic they'll continue to use. Lessons learned, I don't think there were any dramatic new lessons learned. You're never quite sure how the enemy's going to fight in an area like that because we saw many of the leaders depart the area. They operated in smaller groups of 10 to 20. Often they were not well coordinated as they did it, but some of them fought, fairly strongly. But we also were operating so methodically to prevent civilian casualties and to limit damage that the guidance that we had given to General Carter and his team was to just take your time, just try to make this as least violent as possible and try to force it. And I think they did a really good job of that. So it's really the first time we've operated completely that way. I mean, in certain areas we have. So maybe the Taliban will be taking some lessons learned from that as well.
I think, no surprises really, but I think what we heard was things that we've heard elsewhere, but in some ways amplified from the local population. And yesterday's Shura was a good example of this, but I think typical. It's an area which was completely under Taliban dominance only a few weeks ago, and yet yesterday we heard time and time again, President Karzai heard time and time again, how committed these elders were, many of them illiterate, to education for their children. They wanted the schools open, they wanted more schools built, they wanted, where troops were anywhere near the schools, the troops away from the schools in order to enable education to get going again. They say, we need teachers in there, etc. Very, very focused on that. And it was quite striking in that environment where you might have thought security would have been the focus, just how strong a theme education was. I think the second thing that was really striking, again, not a surprise, but very striking, was their absolute determination to take control of their own destiny. They weren't prepared to have either the Taliban or the power brokers and warlords impose themselves on them. And sometimes people say it's got to be one or the other because there isn't another power centre. That's just not true. There is another power centre, and it was the people we saw in that room yesterday. And the courage with which several of them stood up and said in front of some of the people they didn't want to see back in a powerful position that was the case. They wanted decent governance provided by the government. They didn't want to fall under the influence of local power brokers. Was as again not surprising, but really heartening. I think, and it struck us quite strongly. And I think those are the sort of things that one takes away from it. There is a real latent determination among the people of this country who've had a hell of a time over the past few decades to really take control of this opportunity, and they really want to do so, and they've got the courage to do so too.
Greg Chapley, Washington Post. Could you talk a little bit about what you're doing to guarantee that once the ANCOP leave, that the local police aren't again co-opted by those same power brokers, and what sort of impact do you think the Marja Central Helmand operations will have on the upcoming sort of poppy crop, or the next poppy crop?
Go first?
Yeah, I'll take the police part. What we're doing first is we're going to keep Army forces there along with civil order police for an extended period, months. And we are training Afghan National Police, essentially a new crop of Afghan National Police that will be local police that will go in. And we're partnering coalition forces with those police that will be what we call shana bashana, shoulder to shoulder with them for an extended period, so that many of the things that can help them professionalize, we can provide. And in the past, we've not had the forces to do that kind of partnering with the police almost anywhere. And we think that that can make an effort. But key is the first part. We won't be pulling out the Army or Civil Order Police until we're well happy with the development of that. Now, the local power brokers are something that, as the ambassador was talking about, we got to deal with over time, because it's not like you just go arrest everybody.
Yeah, and this is a really important point. There's no point just demonizing particular individuals, although you can always find people who, in a sense, symbolize the problem, because they're just part of a structure, and it's like essentially an entire mafiosi-type system. And if you just remove one or two individuals, somebody else, either from the same tribe or same family, will just step in and take over. So there's got to be, it's a systematic issue, and therefore, just as there are others who have pretty unsavoury pasts who are already within government, we have to find a solution which with these local power brokers gives them a respectable and honourable future, just as we're offering, frankly, to the Taliban and others who are currently outside the mainstream, but that doesn't enable them to go back to exercising power and abusing power over the population. So it isn't a case, as the General says, of arresting people, removing them and all the rest of it. It's a case of finding something that is respectable for them to maintain their position, but without regaining their power. And that's going to be true of people within the system, but it's also going to be true of people outside the system if we're to make reconciliation work. And therefore, it's a complex political situation that in the end, President Karzai and his team are going to have to manage.
Friends, we have about 7 minutes left. I want to make sure that our remaining questions get answered.
Hi, thanks, Courtney Keavy from NBC News. I just have a couple of clarifications, actually. General McChrystal, you said twice now when you were talking about Kandahar that it would depend on the force flow was one of the things you were looking at. Are you anticipating needing more troops if the U.S. forces were tied up longer in Marjah than you had anticipated, getting it, until the local Afghan police are trained up and they can hold it? Do you anticipate that, or do you expect more allied support potentially in Kandahar? And then also, you mentioned the economy of force in the north and the west. Do you anticipate needing additional troops? They're asking for them. And Ambassador, very quick clarification for you. You said the border police, I think you said that 3/4 of them are not properly trained. Was that what you said earlier?
Sure, I'll take that one, and then General McChrystal will just pick up the other two. In order to grow and deploy the Afghan National Police, so this is not the Afghan National Civil Order Police, the ANCOP that we talked about, who are well trained and equipped. They were recruited and deployed with training to follow. That was the pattern that was agreed over the past few years, and they're now up to about 97,000 strong, nearly 100,000 strong, and will grow to 134,000 over the next 18 months. But therefore, that meant a large proportion of them went into the field untrained. Now, there is a program, the Focus District Police Development Program, where the blocks of police are taken out, replaced while they're out, trained, and go back in again. But we have learned over the past couple of years that previous model simply wasn't effective. Putting untrained policemen in the field meant that it was either they became individually corrupted themselves, or they were vulnerable to this sort of institutional capture by local power brokers. That's now been turned around, and I think actually the first course is going through at the moment with NTMA support, whereby they are recruited, trained, and then deployed. And so these two things have to go into parallel. The people out there have to be trained already, and then new forces will go out properly trained before they're deployed. But there is that issue to cover.
So 3/4 of them still are not properly trained?
I think 3/4 of them were deployed untrained. We're gradually working our way through those numbers.
When I talk force flow, I talk about the numbers that have already been approved by President Obama and then the coalition force promises. I do not anticipate asking for any additional forces beyond those already approved. But they will take some months still, as you know, to flow into country.
Hi, Mary Louise Kelly, NPR. Question for you, General. The decision to telegraph your plans for Marja as much as you did was controversial, and I wonder now that we've seen some progress there, whether you think that has proven your judgment right on this, and if so, how much you intend to